and start to look towards a new path, something alternative to what we currently do.
Who could not support something like that?
He's the first politician I've ever heard use the word love.
Dr. Cornel West inspires me because he breaks out of this mold.
He's for peace and equality and getting rid of poverty.
It's so nice to be surrounded by people who appreciate these values.
They're tired of people telling them there's a choice, one or the other. And Cornel West gives us a vision.
Any candidate or any politician that actually supports genocide, I want nothing to do with them.
He doesn't follow the capitalist logic that undergirds both of these parties.
I was so happy that we finally have a good candidate, like a candidate that I would trust to become our president.
Oh, what a blessing to be here. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming to this place. This is consecrated space. 116 years. Worship, service, sacrifice, blood, sweat, and tears, laughter, joy, praising an almighty God. Because you see, South Carolina has historically been ground zero for the black freedom struggle. The only other place that I know of is beloved Mississippi. 2 sites. But South Carolina, Mary McLeod Bethune, Marion Wright Edelman, the greatest prophet after Martin Luther King Jr., the Children's Defense Fund out of Bennettsville. Oh, then you got Dizzy Gillespie. Let's keep the music in it. James Brown, Barnwell, South Carolina. They say Augusta, Georgia. No, he's from South Carolina. He's from South Carolina. Then the godmother of the civil rights movement, Satima Point, says, Clark, what is it about these black folk in South Carolina? That level of moral and spiritual greatness. And by greatness, I mean the biblical definition, because somewhere I read, he or she is greatest among you will be your servant. Yes, that's what greatness is. It's not Alexander the Great. It's not Napoleon. It's not Genghis Khan. It's not Attila. I'm talking about a Jesus-centered person. The blood so soaks you that you can be connected and have a hypersensitivity to the wells of suffering humanity wherever they are. That's what it means to take that blood at the foot of the cross seriously. That's part of the greatness of South Carolina. And then I'm sitting here looking at my brother Brandon Fleming. Give it up for this brother. His beloved wife. Give it, that's right. The young folk understand. Young folk understand. Brother Brandon. Brandon's a high school student of our dear brother, visionary leader. How you doing, my brother? Good to see you, though, man. Definitely. I also want to acknowledge the visionary campaign managers that I have, Kiana Dent, who just has a book of poetry published today. Just published today. And it's called Don't Forget to Breathe. Isn't that heavy? Dedicated to her beloved mother, Crystal Dent Conway. And she's out of Akron, Ohio. So LeBron James ain't got no monopoly on Akron, Ohio. Indeed. And where's Brother Brandon Lucas? He's here some ways. There he is. He's in the sound booth. Absolutely. He's straight out of Los Angeles, and he's also part of our core team. Because you see, for me, I'm simply trying to bear witness and be a witness. I am who I am because somebody loved me. Somebody cared for me. Somebody tended to me. And all of the sacrifice and love and integrity poured into me by Irene B. West. That's my mama. I'll never be one half of the human being my mother was. To elementary school named after her, of my father, Clifton L. West. And we grew up on the chocolate side of Sacramento, California. I know that's a long way away in California. I was baptized by my pastor, Willie P. Cook, and he spoiled me because he was a pastor. He wasn't a CEO of a church. You know what I mean? Oh, he loved the people. He served the people. It's like my grandfather, Reverend C.L. West, out of the chocolate side of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was actually born in the same hospital as the Gap Band. And you all know what Gap stands for. Greenwood, Archer, Pine. That's Black Wall Street in Tulsa. 1921, it was burned down, right, by cowardly white supremacists, brothers and sisters. So I always begin any reflection with trying to be as honest and candid as to where I'm coming from. That's why when I walked in here, I saw my two sisters, and they had such sparkle in their eye, and they said, "Welcome home to the view." I said, I'm in the right place. And then there was another brother walked in and said, my mama, Barbara McFarland, would like to be here, but she's going to be watching on live stream. She's 92 years old. Sister Barbara McFarland, we love you. We know all that you have poured into this institution. Where's her son? Where's her son? He's in the sound booth. There he is, giving up. He's behind him. There it is. Oh, yes. Very much so. Why is this very important? This is crucial because we have to be true to the best of who we are as a people. And we have to be honest about who we are at our best. There has never, ever been a people in the last 400 years who has been so chronically hated. And yet every generation keep dishing out love warriors. Teach the world so much about love and how to love, especially in our music. John Coltrane's Love Supreme, or in our literature, Toni Morrison's Beloved, James Baldwin's Love Soaked Essays, Stevie Wonder out of Whitestone Baptist Church in Detroit, Love in Need of Love. And we haven't even got to Aretha yet. What is it about these people who are so thoroughly hated but hold on to a moral and spiritual greatness so that they opt at our best for love, not hatred and revenge, refusing to get in the gutter with those who are bringing hatred and revenge at us? One of the fundamental questions that will be raised when the American empire no longer exists is, how could it be that these black folk were terrorized for so long and decided not to form a black version of the Ku Klux Klan? That's a moral, spiritual achievement. I tell my vanilla brothers and sisters, I say, when you see black people, you ought to just give them a standing ovation. Because if we had chosen black versions of the Ku Klux Klan, it would have been a civil war every generation. Every generation. Would have been terror, counter-terror, terror, counter-terror, hatred, hatred, eye for eye, tooth for foot, tooth for tooth, blind, toothless. No, here comes Mount View Baptist Church in 1908. Here comes Springfield 157 years ago. Looked that hatred in the face. And grandmama and granddaddy and Aunt Payne and Uncle Earl and the others say, don't you hate them back. You hate injustice. You hate oppression. You hate domination. You take the moral and spiritual stand. Why? Because you connected to a God and you've been changed and transformed in such a way that you can be a force for good, so that you're tied to the kingdom. And if that kingdom of God is within you, then everywhere you go, you ought to leave a little heaven behind. Oh, what a people. Traumatized for 400 years. told that we're less beautiful, less moral, less intelligent, told that we ought to walk around scared and intimidated and laughing when it ain't funny and scratching when it don't itch. And yet here comes that blood at the foot of the cross to take out that fear, take out that doubt, take out those vicious attacks and say, what? I am a child of God. I have a dignity in the sanctity that the world didn't give me and the world can't take away. And I'm passing it on one generation to the next. Give it up for these precious young folk. They know what I'm talking about. You're passing it on. Brother Brandon is passing that on to the younger generation. We used to put it in the 60s, the attempt to niggerize an African people. We made available to the world a Jesus that's in the deniggerizing business. Take all of that self-hatred and self-violation and self-destruction. Take it out of your heart, mind, and soul and bodies. Straighten your backs up. And whenever everyday people that use the language of Sly Stone, they used to play the piano in my church every fifth Sunday. Y'all know Sly Stone, everyday people. Everybody is a star. Wrote that classic called Stand. You've been sitting much too long. There's a permanent crease in your right and wrong. Stand. There's a cross for you to bear. Things to go through if you're going anywhere. He's still alive. Just wrote a memoir called Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself. Y'all remember that funky jam too? Well, I think I got some hang loose Baptists in here because, oh yes, I'm a Baptist, but I spend my time in the nightclub. Pray for me, pray for me, pray for me now. I can't help it, I can't help it. No, that's why I'm not a pastor or a preacher. No. No, I was a gangster before I met Jesus, and now I'm a redeemed sinner with gangster proclivities. Pray for me now. Pray for me. Oh, I'm wrestling with the gangster inside of me. Tupac's not the only one wrestling with the thug inside of him. And if we're honest, that's true for all of us. But the challenge today is that what does the whole world, what does the whole nation learn from we blues people now that the planet has the blues? Now that American democracy has the blues. American culture has the blues. I want to salute my dear brother Paul Merlot. Where's Brother Paul? Where's Brother Paul? Where is he? There, give it up for this brother. Sitting in the back there. Give it up for Brother Paul. He helped facilitate this whole thing. And what is it about a blues people? Based on the tradition that I'm talking about, love warriors, freedom fighters, wounded healers, joy spreaders, those who attempt to empty themselves and give of themselves and be of service of, first and foremost, the least of these. The least of these. I'm not just talking about the folk at the top. It's one thing to be of service to everybody, and as Christians, we ought to love everybody. I don't care what color, I don't care what gender, I don't care what nation. And I'm going to be faithful unto death to that kind of witness. But I will always look at the world through the lens of the wretched of the earth, those folk catching hell, poor brothers and sisters, working class brothers and sisters locked into hoods, locked into reservations, locked into barrios, locked into mass incarceration, too excessive, not enough decent housing, not enough jobs with a living wage, not access to health care, not access to self-community. Those are the ones who have the priorities. Follow Jesus into that temple. You remember that temple was the largest edifice west of Rome. They had 300 imperial troops protecting that temple. And Jesus goes in with the ragtag disciples. Most of them got scared. One of them denied him 3 times later on, Peter. And what did he do? He turned those tables over. Not because he hated anybody. He didn't hate the rich. He hated greed. He hated indifference toward the vulnerable. And indifference to evil is more insidious than evil itself. And we're living at a moment in this society where too many of our spokespersons, too many of our visible figures have become so well adjusted to injustice and well adapted to indifference. So the last 50 years, look at the Black Freedom Movement. We've created a whole class of highly sophisticated black folk, highly educated. That's a beautiful thing. But that's success. We don't come from a people obsessed with success. That's idolatry. You use your success for your quest for moral and spiritual greatness so that who you are has to do with what is the quality of your service to others, is not what is the size of your house. So we generated a whole generation of folk walking around, look at me, I got so much money, I got so much status, I got so much title, like a peacock. I can hear my grandmama saying peacock strut because they can't fly. I'm not impressed by your strutting. I'm not impressed with just how much money you're making. I'm not impressed by just how big your church is. If you got a mega church, do you have mega love? Do you have mega courage? Do you have mega faith? That's where we come from. That's Mountain View Baptist Church. That's greatness. And even we Christians have no monopoly on it. Malcolm X was great. He was a Muslim brother. I got some theological differences with the brother, but his love cannot be denied. Muhammad Ali too. Bell Hooks, Buddhists. I'm going with Jesus. I was blessed to work closely with the Black Panther Party. We had Shiloh Baptist Church on one side, the Black Panther Party on the other. Part of the breakfast program. I've been teaching in prison for 41 years with my precious brothers. Couldn't join the party. How come? Well, they atheists. They couldn't stand the black church because they thought too many black preachers were scared or paid off or sold out. I'd read the newspaper. I said, dang, how come you always got a preacher? Get some doctors and lawyers up in here. Everybody's selling out now. I mean, not only the preachers. I said, but let me tell you something. Bobby Seale and the others came by. I love those brothers. I say, I noticed that all during the day, you listening to Marvin Gaye, and Aretha Franklin, and the Staple Singers. You think you could separate them from the black church? You think you can have the music without what goes into the making of the music? I'm a Jesus-centered, free black man. So I work with anybody who chooses truth, justice, and love, but I'll never give up on my identity and my roots, because I know from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord. And as my dear brother Brandon always knows in our years dialogues at Harvard and other places, that I've never been one to be too preoccupied with popularity if I in any way had to compromise my integrity. And they say, well, how can you become a politician? Well, I'm not a politician. I'm the spillover of a great tradition of a great people into politics. But I'm not a politician, because a politician too often will tell you what their convictions are after they've examined the polls to check and see how things are going. They'll tell you, they'll check their calculations of interest rather than what they really feel deep, deep down in their souls. They are thermometers rather than thermostats. A thermometer just reflects the climate of opinion. A thermostat shapes it. You see, we have been a shaping people. And sadly, we're at a moment in the history of this country where if we don't follow the anthem of black folk, which is lift every and sing it. It's not left every echo. Most politicians these days are echoes. You can almost predict what they say. You can turn on a particular channel and know what the channel has to say on every issue. That's an echo. If black folk had produced only echoes, we wouldn't be here. Voice means what? Finding what is unique to you and finding what is your calling, not just your career. What is your vocation, not just your profession? What are you here to do? What did God put you here to do? Not how you going to make some money. My young brothers and sisters come up to me all the time. Brother West, I'm working on my brand. Oh, okay, I see. What's your brand? I ain't got a brand, but you got to work it out. You're going to work it out, though, brother. What you mean you don't have a brand? My people came here branded on slave ships. Many of their bones at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean right now. That city of bones that the great August Wilson from Pittsburgh talked about in his 10-play cycle. Never confuse a brand with a cause. A brand is a market strategy for your upward mobility. Everybody does in some sense need a brand, but if your brand is not subservient to your cause, you're on your way to being a peacock. And we come from a people of eagles that fly high with style and nobility and royalty, and with a smile, and looks low, concerned with the folk who are being crushed by various forces, be it white supremacy, be it organized greed, be it forms of discrimination, or be it attempts to convince black folk that you shouldn't believe in yourself and have confidence in yourself. Ooh, what a great people we are, but we are losing the greatness of that tradition in the present moment. And so when the opportunity came, and I was asked, they said, Brother West, you think about running for president? I said, ooh, Lord, let me pray on this. Usually I call my brother Clifton West because I can never be the human being he is. He said, you know, Corn, he said, we got to get together and pray on this. And then we got together, and I said, I think that this is an unprecedented moment in the history of the country in terms of the two parties being revealed to be so relatively empty. On the one hand, you got old brother Trump. He's just bona fide gangster. Just bona fide, and proud of it. And what is a gangster? A gangster is somebody that has no principles, no ideals, think they can say and do anything, no accountability, no answerability, don't take no responsibility whatsoever, and just keep moving. And he's been able to do that so far. But we come from a tradition that says, no lie can live forever. Truth crushed to earth will rise again. Sooner or later, you're going to have to be accountable. And then here come the Democratic Party, trying to bring in black folk and brown folk and others, but so tied to Wall Street, so tied to big money that they can't say a mumbling word about poverty. Well, you see, I come out of the Martin Luther King Jr., Fannie Lou Hamer tradition, which calls for the abolition of poverty. It's spiritually sick that there's one poor person or any poor people in America, in the richest nation in the history of the world. You got 3 individuals who have wealth equivalent to 50% of Americans. That's 160 million people have wealth equivalent to 3 people. It is. That's a Keith Sweat moment. Something just ain't right. Something just ain't right. All of these precious folk walking around homeless, precious folk walking around, no clothes, no access to food and housing. What level of grotesque wealth inequality do you think any society can take before it completely collapses? Well, we're reaching that point. Organized greed, institutionalized hatred, and routinized indifference toward the vulnerable, or what the great Howard Thurman called the hounds of hell. in Jesus and the Disinherited, that classic in 1949 that Martin Luther King Jr. walked around in his back pocket everywhere he went. Isn't that the truth, my brother? Martin said, I don't want to make it without Howard Thurman's text, Jesus and the Disinherited. That's the tradition that we have to try to enact and embody, and especially for our young brothers and sisters. We don't want the young folk to think that the only ones you look up to are just the market-driven celebrities, rather than those opting for moral and spiritual greatness. Why? Because that's what I was exposed to. I got to do with young folk what Irene and Clifton and Reverend Cook and Deacon Hinton and Sarah Ray, my vacation Bible school teacher, taught me. What Du Bois taught me. What James Baldwin taught me. That Toni Morrison taught me. Stokely Carmichael taught me. Diane Nash taught me. Connected to that great tradition, but having to do what? Find my voice. And your voice is like your fingerprint. No other person like you in the world. Never will be. Find your voice, then it becomes distinctive. That's what Thelonious Monk told John Coltrane. You're sounding too much like Johnny Hodges, who plays the saxophone for the Duke Ellington Band. You can't be imitating Johnny Hodges' train. He said, well, I'm trying to find my voice. He said, come to my house. We're going to play together. Sit down, train, listening to it. And he said, Monk, it sounds like you got the wrong notes. He said, sometimes right is wrong and wrong is right in piano because I'm making breakthroughs. He said, oh, I'm getting the point now. I can't just imitate. I can't just be a copy. That's one of the challenges of young folk these days. You can be highly successful being a copy, which means that you don't have to empty yourself on the inside and find out who you really are and what your distinctive contribution is. You can just pose and posture and make big money. In fact, we got some folk these days on the radio making $1 million and can't sing in tune. I say, ooh, Nat King Cole and so many others, Luther Vandross and others, turn over in their grave. They hit the right notes. Well, so it is in politics. You got to find your voice. And when you find your voice, you lift your voice. And when you lift your voice, you bear witness. And one of the major challenges we have today, and this is very much what this, I don't even call it a campaign, because for me it's a calling. It ain't nothing but a moment in a movement, like a wave in an ocean of a tradition of a great people that spills over into politics. That's what it is. But you have to be courageous, and you can't be afraid. I want to end on this note, because we live in such gangsterized and polarized times where more and more people are running scared and afraid. Mary Ellen Pleasant, one of the great godmothers of the human rights movement in California, she gave John Brown $500,000 in 1856. John Brown's vanilla brother, wasn't he? He loved black people enough to die for black folk. He's vanilla brother, which means it's not always a function of skin pigmentation. Black skin's a beautiful thing, but we got some black cowards. We got some black gangsters. We got some black thugs. And we all wrestling with that inside of ourselves. So when we talk about blackness, we always talk about blackness at our best, because we're human. And the same is true on the vanilla side of town. You got vanilla brothers and sisters fighting against white supremacy. The problem is there's not enough of them, and they got a lot of cousins who haven't got the memo. But you keep track of people's humanity. But Mary Ellen Pleasant would always say before she spoke, she said, I'd rather be a corpse than a coward. And theologically, God does not call cowards. It's, be not afraid. I will be with you even until the end of the world. And Martin Luther King Jr., I remember Daddy King told me, Martin Luther King Jr. is in the paddy wagon in the dark with just him and a German shepherd, and they going from ATL, from A-Town, from Atlanta, all the way to Reedsville prison. Just Martin in there, in the dark, German shepherd barking. You wondering which way he's going. Daddy King, he said, hey, Brother West, I saw my son. He could hardly walk a straight line. All he could say was, this is the cross we must bear for the freedom of our people. We used to sing a song in church, must Jesus bear the cross alone and all the world go free? No, there's a cross for, and there's a cross. And that cross is not something you talk about. You got to bear the cross. And you got to be willing to die on that cross, knowing that in that death, with that cross, you got a crown coming. Don't talk about the crown if you're not willing to bear the cross. And that's true for each and every one of us. It's true for those who run for office or run for president, acknowledging that the highest standards have already been set by those who came before, and to speak the truth in regard to poor people and working people here and around the world. You see this now with Gaza. How can you watch a genocide taking place before your very eyes and not say a mumbling word? And after 13,000 children are killed, as if a Palestinian baby doesn't have the same value as any other baby in the world, you say, maybe we'll have a temporary ceasefire. Please. And we know the whole world would be different, would respond differently if those babies were European babies, white babies, Jewish babies. For us, a precious Jewish baby has the same value as a Palestinian baby. Our response ought to be the same no matter who it is. But we come from a people where we know that a black life has less value than a white life in the history of this nation. And that's true up until this very moment. And we've got to meet the challenge, because in the last 50 years, we've had too many black spokesmen that believe that a precious poor and working class black child doesn't have the same value as a black upper class child. Oh, if my precious Jack and Jill brothers and sisters have been going to prison with the same level of scope and intensity as precious Jamal and Letitia on the block going to prison, we'd have different kind of black leadership. And that's a challenge. I don't hate the middle class. I don't hate the black bourgeoisie. I just don't want them to be indifferent, scared, and cowardly. Every child has the same value. Every life has the same value. And you embrace their humanity and dignity and sanctity with the same intensity as any other life. Or we fall into the worst patterns of America, which has always said it's only the ones at the top who really have value. And you can manipulate and exploit those below, just like those on the other side of the track. You know what I mean? Hey, no. Mountain View, Springfield together, because they washed by the same blood at the cross. That means what? You're in the world, but not of it. You're cutting against the grain. Well, that's in fact what I'm here to do. It's just let you know this is one of the ways in which I'm trying to be true to my calling, be in the world, but not of it, never afraid, self-critical, because I could be wrong, so I'm always learning, but lifting my voice and being faithful unto death. God bless you.
And so I am going to start us off with a question from the audience that I thought was help give us some direction. And gentlemen, the first question is, what do you believe is the most pressing issue facing the African American community? And so once you answer that question, we'll kind of let that answer guide our discussion tonight.
Material and spiritual poverty. Not enough resources, health care, quality education, housing, but also a poverty of spirit, a poverty of imagination, and a poverty of moral courage. Simultaneously, when the first dignified Africans stepped off of those barbaric slave ships and were taken to the slave auction, on to the slave plantation, it was clear that it was going to be a challenge of too much material poverty, not enough self-love, self-respect, and self-confidence. And so white supremacist bombardment tried to convince us that we couldn't do X and we couldn't do Y. And if you believed it, you were already spiritually enslaved. But then you needed access to resources. That's why when I say I'm an abolitionist when it comes to poverty, I'm an abolitionist when it comes to homelessness. I want to end mass incarceration. I've been to Finland. I've been to Norway. Those are places where they have rehabilitation and education, not solidarity, confinement, where people are unable to continually educate themselves, even given the fact that some of them have done some things they need to come to terms with. See, that's, for me, a crucial part of what we're talking about. And of course, we haven't got to reparations yet. See, I've been supporting reparations for 45 years. And that's just a question of truth and justice. Tell the truth about America. How did South Carolina gain access to all this unprecedented wealth in the last 200 years? And my great-great-great-grandmama and great-great-great-grandfather didn't benefit from it, but their labor contributed to it. Let's tell the truth. Let's understand what the damage done and then what kind of repair is required. You'll never be able to repay what took place. You can't bring the folk back. Never, ever, ever, ever. The lynchings and so forth and so on. But justice requires, justice demands that in the name of truth, that we find out exactly what the damage was done and then are repaired. Financially, materially, and then we got to work on ourselves spiritually and morally and ethically.
Guys, to elaborate on that, because we have here in the state and across the nation, we've got Moms for Liberty, we have conservative school boards attacking our culture and attacking Black studies inside schools. What can we do as a community to respond to that effectively so that our children value who they are and see themselves and value their communities and their history? What can we do to combat what's being thrown at us?
Oh, true. That's so true. Lord. Well, we had a magnificent dialogue this morning in Columbia with my dear brothers in Nellum there, who founders or leaders of the United Citizens Party. They're kind enough to endorse me, so at least I'll be on the ballot. And we were talking precisely about this issue of how do you get people to shift from being addicted to lies and open to truth. Because America's been addicted to lies. America's scared of the truth.
That's right.
Because the truth renders you naked, just rips the veil off of you. You see, you find out who you really are. But that's also true for we Black folk too. You see, when Rosa Parks sat out on a bus in order to stand up for justice, and Martin King was asked to be leader, and he asked for the churches to initially come and organize. It was about 19 churches out of 100 and some. It took a while. That's right. See, so we don't ever want young people to think, some old folk give you the impression, everybody march with Martin. They lying, they lying, they lying.
That's right. That's right.
No, when Martin died, when he came out against the war in Vietnam and said a Vietnamese baby has the same value as an American baby, and when he called for poor people like William Barber and others trying to do now to come together so that they have justice, 72% of white Americans disapproved of him. 51% of black folk disapproved of Martin. You see, so every January you get the feeling everybody loved Martin. They lying, they lying, they lying. When he was walking around in the flesh, he had too much truth. And he was trying to break the back of the addiction to lies. In the same way, what breaks the back of fear? Love. He had too much love. I was blessed to write a song with a genius named Bootsy Collins on the funk capital of the world, an album he put out in 2007. And we were in the studio. He said, Brother West, I got the name of the song. What's the name of the song, Bootsy? When Love is a Threat. Boy, that got something to do with Jesus, doesn't it? Too much love, threat to the Roman Empire. Too much love, threat to Pontius Pilate. It's hard to be on Pontius Pilate's payroll and follow Jesus into the temple. But all things are possible. We serve an almighty God. Oh, yes. But we have to be honest about how difficult it is. You see. And so when we're talking about truth, American schools have never told the full truth about black people.
That's right.
Before Trump, before the right, we have never told. But they told some truth, more so than what Trump and company are talking. But they've never told the full truth. And often, too often, we ourselves are afraid of truth. We want the deodorized version. No, we got to keep the funk in it. And the funk shatters the sanitized, sterilized, deodorized versions of it. You see? And the real funk of it is, my God, look at all that blood. Look at all that sacrifice. Look at all the defeat, but never allowing defeat to have the last word, to bounce back in place. That's the truth of it. And the only way in the end the truth makes us free is we're going to have a little grace. Because you can't do it by yourself. You have to have solidarity, community, and you're going to have a little grace. Because if you think you are in full control, you're going to end up in full despair. Wow. Because we're not in full control. But we can do what we can do with our courage and with our love and with our commitment to justice.
Speaking with education, speaking of not in control, we send our kids every year, every week, to a school system where I'll say only 40% of black children in Greenville County schools are reading on grade level. The number of students that are doing math at grade level is even lower. What can we do to close this achievement gap? What can we do as a community to take that responsibility?
But you can see how warped our priorities really are when it comes to education. Me and Brother Fleming, Cambridge and Harvard. The students we encounter at Harvard, 85% of them went to private schools, 14 students in a class, 2 teachers in that class, and they told they brilliant every day whether they are or not. They just told, you're brilliant, you're brilliant. Sooner or later, they said, I better do something brilliant. Everybody started telling me I'm brilliant. So I know I'm mediocre, but they think I'm brilliant. I better get myself together. That's how you reinforce the self-confidence. That's what he does to these precious young folk, right? Is that right, y'all? He reinforces his love and affirmation, your possibility, your potential. He's telling you how brilliant, and sometimes you saying to yourself, he's seeing something I don't see. That's what teachers do. When teachers really love and care for their students, that's what they do. So what we need, and this is one of the things for me in terms of my platform, I won't go into all the detail, but you see, I want to make sure that the precious poor children on poor sides of town, chocolate, but also the poor white, I want to make sure that they have the same attention, the same focus, the same resources as the well-to-do students do, with the small classrooms, with the resources, and then teachers who really, really, really care. And you watch how quick that's going to shift. And all you got to do to understand what I'm talking about is go into a studio, and you get some of the same students that were told that they can't do X and they can't do Y, hit that microphone and make Jay-Z look like a Boy Scout. No, I'm going too far. Jay-Z's a genius now, but the level of creativity, the level of excellence, the level of talent, how come? Because in that studio, they have a tradition of believing that they can believe in themselves and take it to a level that's unprecedented. We saw the same thing with the brothers picking up the European instruments, the saxophones and the trumpets and the pianos. You see, how do you create context in which black affirmation, black excellence, black self-confidence, black self-respect can flower and flourish? You need resources, but then you got to have teachers who really, really, really care. And I tell you, my brother, you're not strutting at all. You serving the people. And there's nothing wrong with having a joy when you serve the people. Yes, and by showing it, it encourages others to serve the people. You see, one of the problems of the black church is the problem of any church in a society obsessed with money and market. We need money, but money can't be the idol. Because if money becomes too central, then that salvific blood at the cross becomes Kool-Aid. So people feel it's just a matter of just dipping in to get something, rather than being transformed and therefore released and empowered to be a force for the kingdom. The fundamental aim of the church is always the same, is to keep the bread of life fresh. That's what that blood is about. That's what that cross is about. That's what that love is about. That's what that service and sacrifice is about. And when it gets stale, you can rest be assured some idol is getting in place. And all of us have proclivities toward idols. So we need to be reminded. That's why Paul says what? Christians must learn how to die daily. That was the eulogy of Martin Luther King Jr. when Dorothy Day wrote on April 5th, 1968. She's a vanilla sister, Catholic. She had one line. Martin Luther King Jr. learned how to die daily. She just dropped the mic and left. Because that's what Christians are supposed to do. Learn how to die in our own iniquity and sin and emerge with power. Emerge much more equipped, putting on that full armor, the 6th chapter of Ephesians. And once the church no longer has that, then you got a whole different activity. You see, when I was coming along, we prayed not just to get a blessing, we prayed to be a blessing to others. We didn't pray for God to remove a mountain. We prayed for God to give us the strength to climb the mountain. So yes, we're going to have catastrophe. Yes, we're going to have sickness. Yes, we're going to have challenges. Yes, we're going to have crisis. Lord, you have already proven in my life that you have empowered me. I am ready to proceed, equipped, and put it in your hands. See, that's a different way of being in the world, because it means then Christians must never, ever be surprised by evil or paralyzed by despair. Never. I run into black folk, oh, so-and-so called me the N-word. That's your crisis? That's what you call a catastrophe? Please, get off the crack pipe. You're living in a racist society. Go to the prisons and see some of the structural and institutional effects of it, and all you got was just a name, and you can't take it? You better get your armor together. You better thicken up your armor to come to terms with what a real crisis is going to be. And the same is true in terms of what kinds of challenges are presented to us when we go out of our way. Not tied to our own individual interests, but because God has called us to bear witness in this particular way. And that's the greatness of the church, you see. And thank God, we got to be prepared. We got to be ready. But we've had a whole lot of magnificent folk in the church who never went to college, but a spiritual college went through them. Deep wisdom, not just smartness. So much education in America these days is smartness. People just want to be smart. I've never been impressed by just smart folk. If they're cold-hearted, mean-spirited, if they're cowardly, if they're scared, if they're intimidated, if they're egotistical, if they're individualistic. I'm not impressed with your smartness. Let the phones be smart. You better be wise and courageous. It's a different Christian way of engaging the world, you see. And that's what's passed on to us so that we could be in this magnificent place. Magnificent place. And we don't have to worry about the prizes of the world. Even in our music, Curtis Mayfield, Sam Cooke, never won a Grammy. Milli Vanilli won 2. What does that mean? Don't get preoccupied with the prizes of the world. Give me Curtis Mayfield. He don't need no Grammy. He speaks to my heart. He speaks to my soul. I'm going with him. So we don't have to worry about the points of reference and the criteria. That doesn't mean we don't want excellence. And we learn from excellence in a variety of different contexts and cultures, but we don't become preoccupied with just one point of reference that the mainstream puts forward. And that's part of our greatness as a people. I'm telling you, if I had just waited for, the white mainstream to tell me I had potential, I was put in a special school or special room in 3rd grade. We used to call it mentally retarded, but now they call it intellectually challenged. Now, I'm sitting up there in that classroom because I couldn't control myself sometimes. And it wasn't the Holy Ghost I was wrestling with. But I went in there and I met a brother named Rudy who was blind as Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder. And he played a sweet piano that touched the depths of my heart and soul. And I said to myself, how in the God's heaven can this brother have this genius? He can't see nothing. And playing so beautifully, and everybody thinking he's mentally retarded. I said to myself, I'm in the right class. If Rudy's in there, I got potential. Now, of course, my mama wasn't going to allow me to stay too long because she loved me too. But it made me realize how arbitrary some of these categories and labels really are, especially as it relates to black folk. And so when you've been washed by that blood, you say, I got me a point of reference. And I'm going to hold on to that point of reference until the end.
One of the, you talked about crisis, real crisis in our community. One of the real crises that we're experiencing in Greenville are people finding affordable and decent places to live, right? And the other part is that our income and our wealth has been stagnant. I find the two issues inextricably connected. So what can we do to address this affordable housing crisis, and what can we do to promote more black wealth and black business ownership?
I think part of the problem is that we've got so much organized greed at the top of our society that they want to make money at any cost. And they don't put a priority on satisfying people's basic social needs. This is true in healthcare, it's true in housing and so forth. Gentrification ain't nothing but a land grab and a power grab of a real estate industry that's making huge amounts of profit. And it's an afterthought in terms of the precious human beings who are they pushing out. Now that to me is just spiritually empty. It's morally bankrupt. The way to just call it for what it is. But, note again, priorities, you see. That when 62 cents for every dollar of the discretionary budget goes to the military, and when they have housing for the military, they're going to make sure all of them are treated a certain kind of way. How come? Because military is a major priority. It's a matter of national security. Well, my view is poverty is an issue of national security. Inadequate housing is an issue of national security. It deserves the same kind of priority as our present society does to the military. Military said, yes, they sacrificed, they're willing to serve, they're going to receive a certain kind of attention, a certain kind of focus. Well, citizens across the board, especially vulnerable citizens, especially elderly, older citizens who have given so much, immeasurable and measurable of their lives. And they have to end up at the end of their precious lives wondering about food security, financial security. That to me is just unacceptable. And we have to be willing to raise our voices and say, we've got to change the priorities. And the priorities have to do with the lens through which you view the world. If you look at American society primarily through the lens of the stock market, it's going to be qualitatively different. And if you look at America through the lens of the least of these, of poor and working people. So we need a shift in how we measure things. You got folk right now talking about the economy is the best it's ever been. What are they talking about? I live in Harlem. I can't walk outside of my crib without stepping over a precious child of God. And they're going to convince me the economy is doing magnificent. For who? For somebody is doing very well. It could be well for me. Since when does my individual situation become the primary or sole criteria of how you understand what a just society is? You start with the least of these. That's the greatness again of our tradition. And it's one that is worthy. And I know you're working on economic development, but you should be answering some of these questions. I know you got insight on this. I know you got much to say on these things, though. But we salute you and the work you're doing in economic development.
Well, I would be remiss if we wrap up tonight without asking you, Dr. West, a question related to your campaign. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And when you look in South Carolina, a lot of those folks did not participate in 2016 in the elections, didn't participate in the elections in 2020. The numbers in the African-American community in every election continues to go down. They're disinterested. When we look at a number of students that are in college and universities in this country, 18 million. What can we do, or what can you do to attract that group to participate and to get engaged in a campaign like yours?
question, though, because right now it's 38% of fellow citizens don't participate at all. And what is it, about 500,000 folk right here in South Carolina don't participate. Why? Because they just figured the system is so corrupt. It's just legalized bribery and normalized corruption. They said no real movement. Two parties go back and forth, poor people still here, working people still getting exploited and so forth. So they pull back. You got to go directly where the people are. Directly where the people are. And where are the people? They're in the churches, they're in the schools, they're in mosques and synagogues and temples. Right? You go to where their podcasts are, and nowadays, you know, almost everybody got a podcast, you know. So people could ask, well, could do my podcast? Oh, yeah, I got me and 3 of my brothers and a sister, but we're going to have a nice dialogue. Okay, wonderful. Go where they are. Let them know you're interested. And then let them know there is an alternative. You don't have to be deferential to what has been presented to you. We must never forget. I know it's getting real late, but in 1837, great Henry Garnett gave a speech, and he said, black people, never forget, never confuse our situation with that of the Israelites in the Old Testament. For black people, Pharaoh is on both sides of the bloody Red Sea. And then it got silent. And I can imagine somebody in the back, is probably a beautiful black sister, say, could somebody sing a song, please? Because we need the Spirit to descend to help us find a way out of no way. The history of the black church is finding a way out of no way. 244 years of the most barbaric slavery in the history of the modern world. The average slave died at 27 years old. How you gonna find a way out of no way? Somebody sang a song. Somebody grab a hand. Somebody grin. Somebody laugh. Somebody give us some spirit to keep fighting in the face of Pharaoh on both sides of the bloody Red Seas. And yet here we are, Mountain View Baptist Church. Somebody in the past looked at what seemed to be no possibilities at all in South Carolina on the chocolate side of Greenville and said, we're going to find a way for little Jamal. We're going to find a way for Letitia. We're going to love them. We're going to teach them. We're going to empower them. We're going to exemplify integrity in how we live our lives so we can pass it on so that even when they see two pharaohs on both sides, they'll still find a way. That's what Duke Ellington meant when he said it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. He said black people have made dissonance a way of life. We live in the minor key. We hang on the blue note. That's what we've been doing. And we're doing it this very moment. And it ain't got nothing to do with the world's optimism. It's got everything to do with a hope and a faith and a love that we transmitted to us by those who came before. And they say, how do these black folk do it? Just keep track of the love trains. Keep track of the freedom fighters. Keep track of the wounded healers. They did it because they chose to be followers of those on that love train. And those of us who are Christian, we know we stand on promises precisely because bequeathed to us was those who came before that says, if you follow this Palestinian Jew named Jesus, you will discover, in fact, that there's a source of power you knew not of, and right when you thought there was no way forward, lo and behold, here comes the Lord showing up with power, tremendous power. Oh, that's joy. That's shouting material. Everybody else figured what's impossible becomes with us inevitable.